Present day. Present time.
And you don't seem to understand.
Cyberspace, a consensual hallucination experienced daily by billions of legitimate operators in every nation, by children being taught mathematical concepts, a graphic representation of data abstracted from banks of every computer in the human system. Unthinkable complexity, lines of light ranged in the non-space of the mind, clusters and constellations of data like city lights receding. Neuromancer, page 51. We're going to be talking about Serial Experiments Lain. I think for a lot of people, their first contact with Lain is probably through memes. Lain has become a meme, omnipresent on the internet. On the Fediverse, there's an account that posts daily Lain content. And I recently decided to rewatch the show. I first watched it around 8 years ago, and I remembered it being good, but rewatching it, I was struck by how prescient this show from 1998 was. And I'm just gonna put a spoiler alert here. If you haven't watched the show, you'll probably want to do that first and then come back to this video. Lain indeed predicts a lot of the problems that we have in the modern era in 2025. Lain is about a young Japanese girl who's navigating through adolescence, troubled relationships, and her interactions with the wired, a virtual reality that's kind of like the internet, but it encompasses all of human communication networks, so the television is included in the wired. Essentially, it is a more or less sort of cyberspace. It's a very Lynchian anime. In fact, Twin Peaks first aired in 1990, just 8 years before Lain. I would say Lain in many ways is a Fordian, cyberpunk, tech-noir, psychological thriller. It's kind of like a mix between Twin Peaks and Ghost in the Shell. There are many videos that go into breakdowns and analyses of the episodes, which in total are only 13. I thought instead I'd talk about some of the themes and influences that I see in the show and try to connect some dots. We love ourselves to the point of idolatry, but we also intensely dislike ourselves. We find ourselves unutterably boring, correlated with this distaste for the idolatrously worshipped self. There is in all of us a desire, sometimes latent, sometimes conscious, and passionately expressed, to escape from the prison of our individuality, an urge to self-transcendence. It is to this urge that we owe mystical theology, spiritual experiences, and yoga. To this, too, that we owe alcoholism and drug addiction. Moksha, Aldous Huxley's classic writings on psychedelics and the visionary experience. The main character of the show is a young girl named Lain. At first, she appears to be a shy, nervous kid with a normal family. The show opens up with a young girl, Chiza Yamoto, choosing to self-delete. She's a classmate of the main character, Lain Iwakura, and her death and subsequent seeming ability to communicate from beyond the grave sets much of the series' plot in motion. A couple of classmates, and eventually Lain herself, receive an email from Chiza after her death. Chiza writes to Lain, "I have only given up my body. By doing this, I can explain to you that I am still alive. It's okay if you can't understand right now. You will all understand soon." Lain becomes intrigued by this and begins her journey into the wired to investigate her connection to death and technology. It is ultimately a philosophical critique of human communication and connection in a technology-dominated era. Lain reminds me of the fantastic realism of Jacques Berger and Lewis Powell's, who wrote The Morning of the Magicians. The book from the 1960s explores various topics like crypto history, ufology, occultism, and alchemy. And if you've seen the show, hopefully you understand that connection. The main goal of the book is to try to encourage readers to question established narratives and to have a more expansive view of the world and all of its possibilities. Berger and Powell's introduce the reader to fantastic realism, which suggests that reality is more complex and potentially bizarre than we often assume. It challenges the notions of a purely rational and objective world, proposing that there may be hidden dimensions or forces at play. There are a lot of themes in Lain. I think there's a lot of Gnostic and Christian themes to Lain. I think part of Lain is to reveal Gnosticism to be false and to affirm kind of the Christian viewpoint. For people who aren't familiar, Gnosticism is a Christian heretical movement from the first 2 centuries. Hans Jonas writes of Gnosticism in the Britannica, quote, "Many of the so-called Gnostic groups are characterized by a mythology that distinguishes between an inferior creator of the world, a demiurge, and a more transcendent god or order of being." Another frequently encountered theme is that there is a special class or race of humans that is descended from the transcendent realm and is destined to achieve salvation and return to its spiritual origins. Salvation is understood as a revelation that reawakens knowledge of the race's divine identity. In contrast, the traditional Christian emphasis is on redemption through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Although the myth of a demiurge and the theme of reawakened awareness of divine origins have parallels in Platonic and Neo-Pythagorean philosophy, and in fact were partly derived from these traditions, it is often asserted that in the Gnostic myths there's a far sharper dualism involving a much more negative attitude towards the inferior creator god, the material cosmos, and the human body, unquote. Gnosticism often posits this dualistic worldview where they see the material world as flawed or illusory, and the spiritual realm represents true reality. In Lain, the wired acts as a kind of digital approximation of the spiritual realm, contrasting with the physical or real world. Lane's ability to exist in both suggests this Gnostic struggle to try to transcend the material and access a higher truth. In Lain, the main idea that permeates on The Wired is the notion that the real world is false, it's fake, and that The Wired, a timeless digital world that contains all information, is the real world, whereas our reality is the inferior realm, and the hidden knowledge is something that is to be found specifically in The Wired. Quote, "We live together, we act on and react to one another, but always and in all circumstances, we are by ourselves. The martyrs go hand in hand into the arena. They are crucified alone. Embraced, the lovers desperately try to fuse their insulated ecstasies into a single self-transcendence in vain. By its very nature, every embodied spirit is doomed to suffer and enjoy in solitude. Sensations, feelings, insights, fancies, all these are private and, except through symbols and at second hand, incommunicable. We can pull information about experiences, but never the experiences themselves. From family to nation, every human group is a society of island universes." Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. Gnosticism describes this demiurge, a false god who creates and rules the flawed material world. In Lain, Masami, who manipulates the wired and proclaims himself a god, embodies the demiurge. Is a mad scientist who, in an attempt to try to fend off death, downloaded himself as some sort of avatar within the wired. And I am thinking of the Silicon Valley technocrat overlords whose mission is to try to, extend their life, to download their consciousness into AI, to proliferate technology, to further extend themselves. It is this bizarre fear of death, trying to play God, trying to outrun death. I think about specifically Bryan Johnson and the money he spends, the millions of dollars, the crazy things he does just to try to extend his life a little further. Ari wants to convince Lain to join him since she is the frontier between our world and the wired. He encourages her to abandon her physical body or flesh. This is Gnostic messaging. His control over the digital realm and attempts to control Lain mirror the Gnostic idea of this deceptive entity trapping souls in an illusory reality. Gnostics believe that humans contain a divine spark. It's kind of Kabbalistic, and that salvation comes through gnosis, or self-knowledge, to awaken this spark. Lain's journey reflects going down this kind of Gnostic rabbit hole. She discovers her true nature as a godlike entity within the wired, achieving self-awareness and transcending her human identity. Her struggle to understand her existence parallels this Gnostic quest for enlightenment that turns out to be false. Gnostics see the material world as an illusion or a prison, and Lain questions the nature of reality, blurring the lines between the physical world and the world of the wired. Lain's ability to manipulate reality, she can erase memories and alter events, suggests that the physical world is malleable, akin to a Gnostic illusion that can be overcome through higher understanding. Lain is told that she's just an executable program inside a living body with a fake family and fake friends. She's told her purpose is to break down the reality of the real world and the wired. Gnosticism often rejects worldly authority in favor of individual spiritual truth. My truth. In Lain, institutions like the Knights, this is a secretive group that operates in the wired, and societal norms are depicted as manipulative forces. Lain's rebellion against these systems reflects the Gnostic emphasis on personal liberation from oppressive structures. Some Gnostic traditions emphasize reuniting with a universal divine consciousness. The wired in Lain represents a collective consciousness where individual identities dissolve, echoing this Gnostic idea of returning to a unified divine source. Lain's role as a connector of all human minds in the wired embodies this concept. These themes are interwoven with the series' exploration of technology's impact on reality and identity. But there's also Christian themes as well. Christian theology centers on God as the creator and ultimate authority. In Lain, the character of Lain kind of evolves into a godlike figure within the wired, and she has the power to shape reality, erase memories, and connect all human consciousness. It kind of mirrors the Christian notions of divine omnipotence and omniscience, though Lain's divinity is complicated by her human origins and struggles. Lain can kind of be seen as a Christ-like figure embodying self-sacrifice and redemption. She takes on the burdens of humanity's connection to the wired, ultimately choosing to erase her own existence from others' memories to restore balance and free humanity from her influence. This act of self-sacrifice parallels Christ's crucifixion for humanity's salvation. In Christian theology, we have the concept of the fall, where humanity's disobedience introduces sin into the world. In Lain, the wired created by Ari Masami becomes a corrupted space that manipulates and traps human consciousness akin to a fallen world. Ari's hubris in declaring himself a god reflects the sin of pride, and Lain's struggle to correct his actions parallels the Christian narrative of redemption from sin. The theme of resurrection is also echoed in Lane's ability to transcend death and physical limitations. She exists beyond the physical world, appearing and disappearing at will, and even resurrects in the wired after certain events. Christianity emphasizes free will and moral responsibility to choose righteousness. Lane grapples with her godlike powers and the ethical implications of her actions, such as altering reality or controlling others' lives. Her ultimate decision to withdraw from the world respects human free will. Lane has a moment with her friend Alice, where Alice is trying to explain to her why having a physical body is also important, because Lane is, she's been manipulated by these different groups, and she believes that she doesn't need a body. She can go into the wired and do what she wants. And Alice tells her having a body is important because we can feel each other's heartbeats. And she puts Lane's hand on her heart so that Lane can feel her heartbeat and understand the importance of human connection physically, not just through something like the wired. And I think that is kind of a repudiation of these Gnostic themes. I think another important theme is connection in society as surveillance. The panopticon is a machine for dissociating the being seen dyad. In the perific ring, one is totally seen without ever seeing. In the central tower, one sees everything without ever being seen. In the panopticon, the gaze of power is omnipresent, creating a perpetual state of visibility and control. This constant monitoring ensures individuals regulate their own behavior to align with societal norms. Visibility is a trap. Foucault, Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison. In Lane, we see how hyperconnection leads to a loss of privacy and even a sense of self. The wire differs from the internet as it's more of an immersive virtual reality, but even with the internet, people are addicted to watching each other. They follow people online, people they don't even know, have never met, and constantly check social media to voyeuristically live vicariously the lives of others. Foucault argued that our need for connection causes us to engage in social surveillance relationships with others. This connection can lead to a panopticon structure as everyone watches everyone else constantly. There is no way to escape the grid, nor is there any opting out of the techno surveillance society. We are now dealing with permanent visibility, which naturally influences our choices of self-expression. He argued that social participation leads to surveillance and limits our identity formation, or rather, manipulates and shapes it. Through connection, we are drawn into power relations, such as with government institutions, big tech companies, mass media, and the corporate world that act as gatekeepers to our social lives. There's no opting out of that. If you want to reasonably function in the world, you are kind of forced onto these systems and onto these platforms. You're forced to have profiles on a variety of platforms. We thus sacrifice our privacy to stay updated and connected to the digital world. Most jobs are advertised on places like Indeed and LinkedIn. To gain access to those jobs, you have to use the platforms and you have to perform for them. Sometimes we tailor our online personas for each platform, creating these false versions of ourselves to appease an algorithm or an HR gatekeeper. Chiza literally sacrifices her body and privacy for the social connection in the wired. And throughout the show, we see this theme of connection and some of the implications of hyperconnection. Each episode unfolds in layers. In layer 3, entitled Girls, we see an instance of unwilling and unwanted enforced connection. At the beginning of the episode, we see a man who we don't know, at the club Siberia, and that's not like the Arctic Siberia, it's Siberia as in cyber. He purchases a drug called Excella, which appears to be some kind of nanotech drug that accelerates the user's brain functionality. After a couple of minutes, the man starts shooting randomly at club goers. Lane, of course, is there with her friends. Upon seeing Lane, the man's demeanor changes. He seems scared and distraught, and he yells at Lane, "Why are you making me do this? What right do you have? I just wanted to clear my head, that's all." Getting more worked up, he continues, "I don't want anything to do with it. The wired can't be allowed to interfere with the real world." And up until this point, Lane has been in her quiet and demure demeanor, but she changes, breaking out of character. She walks fearlessly towards this guy as he shouts, "I don't want anything to do with it again." Lane threateningly says to him, "No matter where you go, everyone's connected." Realizing he has no escape from this connection, the young man turns the gun on himself. Excella, the drug he was taking to try to escape social pressures, forcibly connects him to the wired. His body's hijacked and his brain is forced to interact with the frequencies from the wired, causing him to act the way he does. He tries to resist the takeover, and he is eliminated for doing so. The underlying message is that participation in society structured by the wired is not optional. No matter where you go, everyone is connected. The commentary is on a hyper-connected society and how this connection removes privacy. It's radical surveillance sold to us as connection, but the connection isn't real. It's tenuous. It's mediated by corporate service providers, big tech companies, and other powerful people who can manipulate the wired and its denizens for their own ends. In the wired, connecting with someone allows them to bypass your privacy in regards to trust and openness, to expose someone's inner thoughts. With this exposure, a person enters the panopticon-like social structure where people are always watching and might be looking for any flaws or inconsistencies. This causes people to behave in ways they normally would not. In a world where people are plugged into the wired, they lose the privacy of their own minds, their innermost thoughts. In the past, people's actions were once considered spiritual characteristics, as we understood that we were part of God's creation. Now, we use data, the new oil, gathered from mass surveillance infrastructures to predict behavior. In Lane, we see Masumi, the false god, enticing people from the wired. Chiza's suicide brings her closer to what she believes to be God within the wired, an entity of power, stability, and control. The wired joins complete control, the determinism of God, and predictive power, the indeterminism of the real natural world, tamed by science and technology, to create a utopian idea of control, stability, and knowledge. Chiza fully believes others will join her in the wired as a safe refuge from the uncertainty and instability of the real world. Especially today, the world worships technology. I'm thinking now about the contract that the administration has just given to Palantir, Peter Thiel's company, to create a central database of every American with all of your information, from tax returns to social media profiles to basically everything, anything and everything about you. I think it's horrifying. I think it's disturbing. And I don't think these people should have access to this. I think we deserve to have privacy. And yet this is the world that we live in. Technology is always seen as progressing towards something better, more efficient. And yet technology has been used to perfect killing with the use of unmanned drones, facial recognition, and AI. Tech company CEOs are treated as gurus and prophets rather than the profit-seeking businessmen and merchants of death that they are. Lain encourages us to question these technologies. By controlling how we perceive and fulfill our emotional needs, tech oligarchs today claim connectivity will reduce loneliness rather than amplifying it, while ignoring the invasive drawbacks of constant surveillance to shift economic conditions to their side. We have Mark Zuckerberg out here telling people that, oh, most people only have 3 friends in their friend group and they should really have more like 15. So we're going to create AI agents to be their friends. It is psychotic. These companies prey on people's desire for social connection and intimacy, corralling users into systems where they have actually very little control, where there is no real option to opt in or opt out as they gather more and more control and consolidate more power. The data they are amassing on us, especially the younger generation that has grown up online, is terrifying. They strip us of our dignity, of our mystery and anonymity, rendering us helpless, observable, predictable, and vulnerable, as they know more about us than we know about ourselves. Think about what we learned about Cambridge Analytica, that they have 5,000 to 8,000 unique data points on each American voter. Do you even know 5,000 to 8,000 unique things about yourself? No, of course you don't. Lain gives us a window into a dark future if we stay on our current trajectory. It is a warning that should be heeded. Cults offer an escape from reality, but in doing so, they create a new, twisted reality that binds and controls their followers. John Anderson. Cult leaders are master manipulators who prey on the basic human desire for connection and purpose. They capitalize on vulnerability, gradually eroding individuality and replacing it with unwavering loyalty. Michael Parker. The Knights are an enigmatic and mysterious group in the world of Lain. The organization of techno-anarchists challenges the status quo in Lain's perception of reality. The Knights of the Eastern Calculus are kind of like a secret society of hackers whose goal is to break down the barrier between the physical world and the metaphysical realm of the wired. Their goals align with those of mcveigh, who wants to merge these realities using Lain as a conduit to integrate human consciousness into the wired, effectively dissolving the distinction between reality and the digital realm. The Knights see Lain as a godlike figure, and they want her to unify the realms. They're adherents of mcveigh's Protocol 7, a system designed to connect human consciousness directly to the wired without the need for physical devices. Could you imagine, right? If humans could just connect to the internet without needing a cell phone or a computer. They hope to create a single collective consciousness where the distinction between reality and the digital world ceases to exist, viewing this as a form of transcendence or evolution for humanity who they think has stagnated and stopped evolving. To this end, throughout the show, they manipulate events and people, including Lain, in an attempt to achieve their vision. They often employ unethical means like spreading disinformation, hacking, and psychological manipulation. They are not altruistic. In fact, their actions suggest the opposite. These are people who are special boys, seeking power and control within this new reality. Their ultimate goal is to reshape existence itself. The Knights, using their hacking capabilities to disseminate lies, false information, and rumors across the wired to influence public perception and behavior. They spread urban legends to destabilize the boundaries between the real world and the wired. They manipulate Lain into embracing her role as a godlike entity. They send her cryptic messages. They orchestrate events that push her to explore her powers and connection to the wired, exploiting her curiosity and confusion. They develop and distribute devices like the psyche chip, which enhances computer performance and it deepens the user's immersion into the virtual reality-like world of the Wired. They send Lane a psyche chip to draw her further into the Wired, exploiting her latent abilities to manipulate reality. They are linked to Acela, the nanomachine drug that induces altered states of consciousness, leading to violent psychosis in users and destabilizes their perception of reality. The Knights manipulate the kids system, derived from a failed experiment to harness children's psychic energy to project phenomenon like evil Lane into the real world, further eroding the boundaries. The Knights create a malicious digital doppelganger of Lane to act as a tool for their agenda. This entity spreads rumors, hacks systems, and incites destructive behavior. They target Mika, Lane's sister, with relentless hallucinations and cryptic messages, causing her to become trapped in a liminal state between the real world and the Wired. They manipulate Lane by questioning her identity in reality, using Taro, a young boy, to deliver the psyche chip that pushes her deeper into the Wired. They develop Phantoma, a virtual reality game that links players across different game types. Players, believing their actions are inconsequential, commit violence that spills into reality, such as a player murdering a girl before realizing the consequences. They try to feed Lane chips and information that modify memories, trying to get her to align more with their goals. Their tactics allow them to exert enormous influence while remaining largely anonymous. They are the hidden hand pulling the strings in the background. I think a parallel can be drawn to accelerationist groups today, like 764. 764 is an 09A inspired decentralized online network, primarily active on platforms like Discord and Telegram, known for sextortion, glorification of violence, and extreme content like CSAM. They're part of a broader movement seeking to destabilize society to bring about radical change. They use digital platforms to coordinate and amplify harmful activities, such as sextortion schemes targeting minors into producing explicit content or engaging in acts of self-harm. Like the Knights, they exploit anonymity online to operate covertly. Like the Knights, they also employ psychological tactics, including blackmail and intimidation, to control their victims. Both groups target individuals' mental states to further their agendas. The Knights drive Mika into a liminal state and manipulate Lane's identity, while 764 uses sextortion and psychological coercion to break victims, creating real-world chaos. The Knights aim to merge the real world and the Wired is a form of techno accelerationism, seeking to transcend human limits through digital means. Both groups act as shadowy cult-like organizations with fluid membership, using anonymity to evade accountability. The Knights' worship of mcveigh parallels 764's adoption of the 09A occult aesthetics, where symbolic and ideological devotion drives their actions. Man is an individual only because of his intangible memory. But memory cannot be defined, yet it defines mankind. The puppet master to Major Motoko Kusanagi, Ghost in the Shell. I think one of the most obvious influences on Lane is Mamoru Oshii's Ghost in the Shell, which was released in 1995. Both works are seminal cyberpunk anime that explore themes of identity, consciousness, and technology. In Ghost in the Shell, the ghost is a reference to the soul or consciousness of a person that exists even in a cybernetic body. This idea is central to Major Motoko's existential crisis as she questions whether her own consciousness is human or a byproduct of her cybernetic enhancements. Lane similarly explores identity through her connection to the Wired. In Ghost, the Major's ability to dive into networks and interface directly with digital systems predates Lane's immersion in The Wired. Both characters struggle with the blurring of boundaries and dissociation as they merge with vast digital networks. Both works draw on similar philosophical questions about the nature of reality and self in a technological society. Ghost deals with ideas from figures like Descartes and his notion of mind body dualism, and Philip K. Dick in his idea of artificial identity. Lane takes this further, though, into a more abstract metaphysical exploration of existence in a digital realm. Both Ghost and Lane depict techno dystopias, but they are very different, with Ghost being more urban and Lane being suburban. Both have similar visual styles and symbolism. Both draw on technological paranoia, with Ghost portraying a society where hacking, surveillance, and corporate control pervade. Sounds similar. Sounds, just saying. While Lane portrays The Wired as a force that invades personal lives and erases boundaries between the real world and digital. This is seen visually throughout Lane as we see power lines being more and more crammed and sprawling as the show progresses and The Wired pushes further into the real world. Katsuhiro Otoma's Akira from 1988 was a significant influence on Lane. Akira really did shape the cyberpunk genre's aesthetics, themes, and symbolism. It's a dark style of animation with bright neon lights, stark contrast, and urban alienation, and this influenced Lane's visual approach, although Lane is more muted and surreal. Akira portrays tech, particularly through the government's experiments with psychic powers, as a double-edged sword capable of both progress and destruction. This theme resonates with Lane, where The Wired is both a liberating network and a dangerous force that erases individuality and reality. Both share similar themes of humans transcending their limitations via technology and psychic power. Both grapple with the implications of people gaining immense power through technological or metaphysical means. Akira hints at collective psychic energy, which is similar to Lane's concept of The Wired as a digital collective consciousness where identities blur into a shared neural network. I think a less obvious influence on Lane is David Lynch and Marc Frost's Twin Peaks show, which ran from 1990 to 1991. This influence can be seen in the surreal tone and narrative structure that is non-linear, the psychological depth, and the use of really good music. Both shows explore themes of identity, reality, and the metaphysical, as well as conspiratorial leanings. Twin Peaks is known for its dreamlike quality, its disjointed and non-linear way of storytelling, which blended kind of like a mundane soap opera style drama with the surreal and supernatural elements. Lane uses a similar approach, using a fragmented, non-linear structure to mirror the chaotic and interconnected world of The Wired. Both shows make use of dream sequences and visions to blur the lines between reality and the subconscious. Like Twin Peaks, Lane uses surreal visuals such as the omnipresent telephone wires and their constant buzzing, shadowy figures under a streetlight, and distorted digital landscapes to create a kind of dreamlike atmosphere very similar to Twin Peaks. In Twin Peaks, the Black Lodge and White Lodge represent kind of like alternate dimensions or states of consciousness that intersect with the real world. The Wired of Lane functions in a similar manner as a digital realm that overlaps with and reshapes reality. Both Laura Palmer and Lane have fragmented and dual personalities. Laura as a wholesome high school prom queen, volunteer, but also a troubled girl involved in drugs and sex. That mirrors Lane's identity as a timid schoolgirl, but then a confident godlike figure in The Wired. Both shows make use of doppelgangers and shadow versions of characters, exploring themes of fractured identities and the blurring of self in a surreal or technological context. The Lynchian hallmarks of fragmented narratives, dreamlike visuals, and ambiguous mysteries are used in Lain in a techno-noir way, with The Wired serving as the technological equivalent of the Black Lodge. The events of Ruby Ridge, Waco, Oklahoma City, and Heaven's Gate were significant in the 90s, shaping a lot of the discourse on cults, government overreach, and the dangers of radical ideologies. The Waco siege involved a 51-day standoff between the Branch Davidians and the U.S. government, ending in a fiery blaze that killed 76 people. The attack on the Branch Davidians became a symbol of government overreach and fueled a lot of anti-government sentiment, and rightfully so. The Branch Davidians were portrayed as a doomsday cult and Koresh as a child predator, fueling fears of cults and religious communities. The media frenzy surrounding the siege mirrors Lain's depiction of information overload and The Wired's ability to amplify narratives and disinformation. Lain explores how The Wired can radicalize people, spread conspiracies and rumors and lies, and how digital spaces can amplify destructive ideologies. The 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, which killed 168 people, including children, was the biggest act of domestic terror in American history, and it was incorrectly portrayed by the media as a lone wolf attack carried out by Timothy McVeigh in retaliation for Ruby Ridge and Waco. We all know the real story is far more complicated and involves the government, their use of informants, etc. The bombing's cultural impact was enormous, including how it galvanized militia groups, and all the different theories that have proliferated mirrors Lain's portrayal of The Wired as a space where truth is malleable and different ideas can proliferate. Heaven's Gate was a millennial UFO doomsday cult led by Marshall Applewhite. In 1997, the group committed mass self-deleting, believing they would ascend to an extraterrestrial next level via the Hale-Bopp comet. This event was widely covered in the media and highlighted the use of technology by the group to spread their apocalyptic spirituality. This was right at the time where there were fears of like Y2K and all of that nonsense. Heaven's Gate seems to have influenced Lain's view of The Wired as a quasi-spiritual or metaphysical realm. The group's belief in transcending human bodies through a digital or cosmic evolution parallels Lain's depiction of The Wired as a space where users seek to transcend physical reality. The Knights in Lain resemble Heaven's Gate in their cult-like devotion to a higher plane of existence fueled by technology. The 90s saw growing concerns about the internet's potential to foster extremism. Lain captures this anxiety around technology by portraying The Wired as a space where reality is distorted and cults and conspiracies can manipulate perception. All of these events were mass media spectacles that dominated news cycles and were sensationalized by the media. It is not possible to make a lasting compromise between technology and freedom because technology is by far the more powerful social force and continually encroaches on freedom through repeated compromises. To those who think that all this sounds like science fiction, we point out that yesterday's science fiction is today's fact. The Industrial Revolution has radically altered man's environment and way of life, and it is only to be expected that as technology is increasingly applied to the human body and mind, man himself will be altered as radically as his environment and way of life have been. Let's stick to the practical and the concrete. Would you like it if people lived in a virtual world if machines were smarter than people, if in the future people, animals, and plants were products of technology. If you don't like these ideas, then for you, the computer and biological sciences clearly are dangerous. Theodore Kaczynski. I think the influence of Uncle M.K. Ted's Industrial Society on Lane is quite evident. The Unabomber's Manifesto was published in 1995, just 3 years before Lane came out. Ted argues that industrial society's technological advancements were fundamentally eroding human freedom, autonomy, and psychological well-being, creating a system that is dehumanizing and prioritizes efficiency and control over individual agency. I'm thinking again about Doge and Trump's contract with Palantir to create a centralized database on every American citizen in the name of efficiency. The manifesto asserts that industrial society forces people to adapt to technology, reducing autonomy and creating dependency on complex systems. In Lane, the wired, a metaphor for the internet and advancing networks, dominates human interaction, with characters like Lane becoming enmeshed in it. Her increasing reliance on the wired to understand reality parallels Kaczynski's warning that technology subsumes human agency, reducing people to cogs in a larger machine or nodes in a larger network. I think Lane reflects Ted's concern that technology creates a world where people are disconnected from natural human experiences, as seen in Lane's alienation despite her omnipresence in the digital realm. She's everywhere, she's around and connected to everyone, but she is fundamentally alone. The manifesto argues industrial society systems, bureaucracy, technology strip away personal freedom by imposing rigid structures. In Lane, the wired's manipulative forces, such as the Knights and Arimasimi, control information and influence behavior, echoing Ted's fear of centralized tech power and the undermining of the individual. The manifesto highlights the psychological toll of industrial society, including alienation, depression, and loss of purpose. Lane explores this through its characters' fractured psyches, Lane's fragmented identity, and her friends' superficial connections, and just the general sense of existential unease. Ted predicted that advancing technology will tighten control over society, creating a dystopian future. And I just have to say, we do not condone his methods, but his reasoning is sound. Where's the lie? Lane's Wired represents this, a digital realm where boundaries between self and system dissolve. Lane projects a future world where individuals are fully integrated into a neural network, losing autonomy and privacy. Kacynski argues industrial society alienates people from their natural state, leading to these existential crises. Lane reflects this in a future where digital integration blurs the line between human and machine. Ted warned that tech replaces authentic human experiences with artificial constructs. Simulations, essentially. The manifesto critiques the concentration of power in tech systems, which Lane mirrors through Masame's godlike control of the wired and the Knight's covert influence. The vision warns of a future where technology, unchecked, enables surveillance and manipulation on an unprecedented scale. And we are right there, folks. Industrial society is an ever-prescient critique of the dehumanizing effects of technology, influencing Lane's depiction of the wired as a symbol of technological overreach alienation, loss of freedom, and autonomy. Lain extends the ideas in the manifesto into a future where digital integration threatens identity and freedom, echoing Ted's warnings while offering a more philosophical, less prescriptive perspective. The incident does not mean that most Japanese were not appalled by Ohm. It does suggest that many young adults viewed their society as so corrupt and hypocritical that any degree of mockery, if not violence against it, was justified. The ditties blend Japanese popular cultural themes of saccharine, childlike goodness, and viciously detached sadism, which Ohm drew upon as it tapped the barely suppressed rage of the young against their society. Robert J. Lifton, Destroying the World to Save It, Shinrikyu, Apocalyptic Violence, and the New Global Terrorism. Finally, I think one of the most obvious influences on Lain was the Aum Shinrikyu cult. Aum was a Japanese doomsday cult that allegedly carried out the 1995 Tokyo subway sarin gas attack. Aum was founded by Shoko Asahara in the 1980s. It blended Buddhist, Hindu, and apocalyptic Christian elements with a fascination for science and technology. The group believed in a coming Armageddon that, of course, only its followers would survive. The 1995 sarin attack, which killed 13 and injured thousands of others, was a national trauma. Like Waco, Oklahoma City, and Heaven's Gate, it too received sensationalized mass media coverage, warning of the dangers of charismatic leaders, radical ideologies, and the misuse of technology. The attack, combined with Ohm's unique use of media at the time and recruitment of tech-savvy members, resonated with Japanese concerns about modernity, spirituality, and the rise of technology. The Knights of the Eastern Calculus in Lain parallel Ohm's cult structure. The Knights manipulate the wired to achieve a techno-spiritual agenda, similar to Ohm's blend of mysticism and technology. Masame Eri, the Knights' leader and self-proclaimed god of the wired, mirrors Shoko Asahara's messianic persona in how he used charisma and false promises of transcendence to control followers. Ohm had many highly successful and educated members, which made their actions even more shocking to the Japanese public and psyche. The national shock of Ohm's educated members turning to violence likely influenced Lain's portrayal of seemingly rational people embracing very extreme beliefs within the wired. Ohm's apocalyptic vision involved the use of technology, chemical weapons, attempts at nuclear and laser tech to hasten the Armageddon and establish a new world order. In Lain's world, the wired serves as a space where technology enables apocalyptic and transcendental ideologies similar to Ohm's vision. Lain reflects the social unease of the time through its portrayal of a fragmented, distrustful world. The Men in Black and Tachibana Labs represent shadowy institutions paralleling public skepticism about government competence post-Ohm. This is definitely not a conclusive list of the themes and influences on Serial Experiments Lain, but I thought it was certainly a good starting point. There are other obvious influences, like the stylistic influence of Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue, the rise in popularity of shows like The X-Files, etc. There seems to be even a hint of Lovecraftian influence as well. But this has gotten very long, so that's it for now, friends. I hope you all have a good day, and let's all love Lain.